Hey guys, MasterofSweetness here, and welcome to the first episode of The Logical Paradise Show, the show that follows science, news, politics, and religion, and much more, and tries to inject some logic in a seemingly perpetual sea of chaotic bantering. Okay, first up, I'd like to discuss something that hasn't been talked about in the media that much lately, or at least not directly. I want to talk about global warming. Now, in the 2009 and 2010 winter season, most everyone saw snow at some point, whether it was a light flurry or a full-blown blizzard. In fact, in my town of Jackson, Mississippi, the whole city was shut down because of the water system basically froze over. And in a special session of the Mississippi Congress, Governor Haley Barbour equipped, "This global warming is freezing me to death." Now, to many global warming naysayers, they point to that winter and say, "Ha, see that? Proof that global warming is a crime." Well, that, my friends, is where you are wrong. You see, during the summer of 2009, there were exceedingly high temperatures, much like this year. And when there's high temperatures, you have high humidity, especially in the coastal regions of the country. And that means a lot of water in the air. During the year, the water is moved around by the jet stream, which under normal conditions would be distributed throughout the country. But since it stayed so hot for a longer period than normal, most of the water stayed in the air. Yes, some did fall as torrential rains, another byproduct of global warming, but the higher than average temperatures caused most of that water to be reabsorbed by the air. So, the humidity level remained fairly high by the time winter came around, and the water began to crystallize in the cold temperatures of the higher atmosphere, and thus came down either as snow, sleet, freezing rain, or whatever else. Not to mention that high humidity plays a factor in wind chills. And it's sad that media doesn't cover it as often as they should. Such was the case in Maryland when an enraged gunman stormed into the Discovery Channel headquarters, the Discovery Communications Tower in Maryland, demanding that the Discovery Channel remove its reality shows and stick with scientific and pro-environmental programming. The man was shot by police while in the midst of negotiations, which was a real shame. His life should not have been extinguished. And to add insult to injury, once the situation was over, the media went on like it never happened. So in essence, he died for nothing. Now, this man was no martyr, and there were different ways to go about this, but to have the incident brushed off your shoulder and ignored, people are missing the point. All he wanted was for the Discovery Channel to fulfill the original mission by taking a stand and restoring the planet. Speaking of restoration, we now move on to Pope Benedict. In his Restoring Honor rally on 8/28, Glenn Beck crossed the line, not necessarily in the message he was trying to convey, but the circumstances that surrounded it. At first, it seemed like he was going down the right path, talking about how the nation needs to be turned back to God. I'm all for that, and he even went a step further as to have clergy from the main three, Islam, Christian, and Judaism, stand arms linked together. What a wonderful message and promise. However, what you see on stage, and maybe even why Glenn Beck is there, is totally opposite as to why most of the supporters in the audience are there. When things like this...
Religion is important to you. It's important to people here today. What about Judaism or Islam? How does that factor in? Is that okay as well?
Judaism, this Bible was written by Jews. Islam, it doesn't factor in.
What do you mean?
It just doesn't factor in. They're here to kill us. If you're a good Muslim, you'll kill Christians.
Are being said and not being corrected. Fair enough, he was on stage when this was being said, but surely he heard about it just as I have. Yet despite his message of unity through faith, He lets this hate fester without calling it out. Mr. Beck, I'm pulling a play out of your playbook, and I challenge you, sir, to follow up on your rhetoric and renounce the people that are fueled by this religious hatred. Not only those that may have been at your rally, but the mosque protesters in New York and all over the country. Show that you stand by what you proclaimed on that day, and take a part in your own message and stand up for what is right. If you believe in your own message, Mr. Beck, then you know there is no good reason why people are protesting the Park 51 mosque and other mosques all over the country. They are only fueled by bigotry and hatred. So I challenge you to make a stand and rebuke the anti-mosque protesters and share with them your sense of unity that you so vividly spoke of on 8/28. Now, a little more direct discussion on religion. A week or so ago, I was online with a friend, and he sent me this picture. Now, I respect my atheist friend and all atheists, but when I see things like this, it kind of makes my blood boil. First, take a look at the picture again. Notice that all except one are from the Old Testament, and most specifically, these were books that defined laws that, if the Hebrews followed, would promise them a prosperous nation and long, healthy lives. Now, let's look at them individually. We'll save the New Testament one for last. Remember, this was written 5,000 years ago. Okay, first on the list, shaving. Okay, 5,000 years ago, the only thing you could shave with were stones, or at most a bronze blade, which first of all were very dirty, and there was a great risk of cutting yourself, which if you 1 + 1 = 2, meaning that would lead to infection. Number 2, gossip. That's just a matter of practicality. Don't you get pissed when you hear people talking about you behind your back? Well, if you do, then certainly people 5,000 years ago would too. Gossip ruins relationships, business, and if allowed to grow, could kill and even topple nations. Number 3, football on Saturdays. Now, this is talking about the Sabbath, and one of the 10 Commandments is to keep the Sabbath holy by not working or causing other people to work, and so on. However, it is never explicitly said what day the Sabbath is actually on. While the Jews take it to be Saturday, and most Christian denominations to be on Sunday, it does not really matter what day you declare as the Sabbath. All right, number 4. I'm going to knock the one about lobster and pork out at the same time. First, remember this was 5,000 years ago. Second, do you know what lobsters and most other shellfish and pigs have in common? They live in the dirt. Most shellfish, in fact, sleep in the dirt, either on a beach or in the sand in the bottom of bodies of water. And that, again, is hazardous to your health. In a time when there are a few ways to sanitize things, that's why rabbis have to inspect food to make sure the blood of the animal the food came from is not tainted. Not because of some spiritual taboo, but because it could make you sick. Number 5. Cotton polyester blends. This is so obvious the guy with the chalk needs to be slapped with a ruler. They lived in the desert, and cotton polyester blends suck for trying to stay cool in the desert. Enough said. Number 6. Associating with women during their periods. Okay, once again, remember 5,000 years ago, this is 5,000 years ago. Now, for those of you who don't know, what causes a woman's period is a woman's womb grows in preparation for pregnancy to provide nutrients for the fetus. However, if there is no fetus, their bodies slough off the unnecessary layers, and at that time, a woman's immune system is at its weakest point. So not only could other people get sick from her, but more importantly, the woman could get sick. And since it was 5,000 years ago, getting sick is almost a death sentence, especially if you are a group of people that are wandering the desert for 40 years. You don't want the people to die out before they can reach the destination. And practically, who would want to hang around women with their periods anyway? Number 7, cursing. Now, this is the New Testament one. Now for the final one in the list. It's kind of redundant anyway. This just goes without saying, really. If you want to be seen as a respectable human being, whether if you are witnessing to non-believers, trying to get a job, if you're a public figure, or simply working wherever your workplace is, you don't cuss. Putting this on this list is pretty stupid. Go ahead, cuss up a storm. Make sure you put a cuss word in every sentence and see how many jobs you get, or if you keep your job. Just look at politicians. They get in trouble for swearing all the time, and this is 2010. So if cussing was a tipping point in the decision to become an atheist, then you, as a human being, need to reevaluate your life. And I do not necessarily mean in a spiritual sense. Now let's get something a little closer to home. Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour made claims that Southern Republicans were behind the civil rights movement all along. He claims that he went to integrated schools and it did not bother him. Now, as one of the leading figures in the GOP, he should know the history of his own party. In the early days, yes, Republicans were pro-integration and so forth. And as a result, after Reconstruction, the South voted for Democratic candidates. However, when Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat, signed the 1964 Civil Rights Act into law, it was the Republicans that had a shift in platform. The Republican Party became a party for white racial grievance. Now, that isn't to say Republicans are racist. It is just a historical point of fact that school integration was the cause of the shift of platform and the shift in dominance in the southern states from Democrat to Republican, which is not really a shift at all. It's just that Democrats went Republican or Republican went Democrat. So, yeah. Why Barbour is making claims like this is unknown. Perhaps he is trying to show that Republicans aren't racist, despite the current rise in bigotry, especially towards Muslims, by Republicans. But he is going about it the wrong way. It's like the Germans saying that they aren't Nazis by acting like the Holocaust didn't happen. You just can't do it like that. Alright, that wraps up the first episode of The Logical Paradise. If you are a Millsap student, or if you are just curious, stay tuned for the first episode of the Millcast, coming up next.